Hi guys, I'm Sienna Lou. You've asked me for a tutorial on my gauntlets that I've made for a Nightwing cosplay. These are them, they're not yet finished. These are obviously just the craft foam, unpainted, unsealed versions. They do have, or they will have, little tabs that will help them when they do get put on to secure them, and there's 3 of them on each side. Now I haven't yet painted them because I'm not sure that I'm overly happy with them. The design of them, mainly the fins, they look cool, but for a Nightwing cosplay I'm not too sure about it. I've also done previously Batwoman gauntlets. They were for a Batgirl cosplay, but I did really like the design and the shape of them. They were really cool. They're obviously unfinished, unpainted. They do have the tabs on them. No Velcro though, so I will eventually get around to doing that. So I have only ever made gauntlets out of craft foam. You can make them out of anything you like, really. Warbler. I've not used Warbler before, something that I do want to do. You can make them out of cardboard, really, anything. Cardboard's not very user-friendly. I have made them for a uni project before and they were very bulky and very awkward. So I don't suggest using cardboard. If you can find craft foam, it's probably the most comfortable and easiest ones to do. Craft foam, if you haven't heard of craft foam before, it's essentially just pieces of foam, pieces of, you can get them in all different sizes. This is an A4 size, and they come in small packets, big packets. I mean, I've got a huge bunch of craft foam here that I use for different things, and then I've got, smaller pieces as well. But you can get them in big sheets, which is really handy for when you're doing larger armour, or if you're doing gauntlets and you have a decent sized arm. They won't fit on an A4 piece in one sheet, so you will need a larger sheet for that. I'm lucky enough that my arm fits in an A4 piece of paper, so any gauntlets I make for myself will fit in an A4 piece of paper, which is handy also when you're designing them. So there's heaps of, if you Google template for gauntlets, there's heaps of things that come up which will help you with the base of the design, which is really handy. It's what I started to use when I first made them, just so I could have the right shape around my arm. So I'll show you with my Batwoman ones what they look like on. So you'll notice that they have, sort of a curve at the top and the bottom, and they go in, they taper in on each side. That's so they fit nicely, obviously, around the arm. So if you put them on, wrap them around, obviously this will be hard because I don't actually have Velcro for it, but you'll notice that they actually sit quite straight on the arm. The lines are all very straight, and they all, they sort of look a little bit more natural. Now, if you were to cut a straight line, when you fold them around your arm, they won't actually meet up nice and straight like they do here. They'll be sort of a bit warped, and I mean, you can if you want to, but there's no real extra effort in cutting the shape into it. Now, I've already got a pre-cut one. I'm just going to redo the Nightwing ones that I did the other day. So that's my pre-cut template for it. I mean, that's obviously, you cut 2 pieces out of that, the back piece and the front piece. And then I've also got my 3 fins. So I've got my 3 fin shapes. Again, they were just relative to the size of the gauntlet, and then the strap pieces, which I actually made slightly bigger, slightly longer, given that they're for my husband's arms. He's got quite muscly forearms, so he probably needed just that little bit of extra sturdiness. If you are worried about maybe the glue you're using or them coming off during a convention or wherever you're going to be wearing them, you know, you can never really be too safe with securing everything. Now, what I did essentially when I was first starting out was I'd just get a piece of A4 paper, which I don't have in front of me, but I'd get a piece of A4 paper and I'd basically draw the distance from my wrist to where I want the gauntlet to end. So if it was sort of here, or if I wanted bigger ones or smaller ones, or however the case may be, put my arm on the piece of paper and I'd actually draw a line from my wrist to that point, and I know that the highest point of the gauntlet, so from top to the bottom, would be that distance. I was then able to, through trial and error, it might take you a number of times, a number of goes to work out the exact right shape. Don't be too stressed, it took me ages to figure it out. But I got there eventually, and now I basically just use the 2 templates for everything. I know that if you do get online, you can find pre-done templates for you, which is really handy. It is literally just a shape like that. You can then wrap it around your arm and, you know, work out the size it needs to be. Now this one I did, which was just a rough one. I was actually showing somebody else. When I actually put that around my wrist, around my arm, you'll notice that I haven't actually cut it correctly because the tops and the bottoms don't, hang on, where am I? The tops and the bottoms don't actually match up. That overlaps quite a bit. So you'll also notice that if I pull that tight, it then doesn't look very flush because it goes in and makes a funny shape and just doesn't look great. So start with that, put it around your wrist, use a grey lead pencil, draw the lines around. So, you know, once you've got the bit of paper around, secure it with a bit of sticky tape, and then actually draw the straight line around. So that way when you take it off, you'll have that line as a bit of a guide. Now, all I use, literally, is craft foam, a pair of scissors, always have a pair of scissors, and a Stanley knife. I use glue, it's called Zappa Gap. My husband actually uses it for his miniatures, but it's amazing glue if you can get a hold of it. Otherwise, PVA glue works fine, it just takes a little bit longer to dry. I also use a Dremel. If you don't have one of these, I strongly recommend going and getting one. They're not too expensive. You can pick them up from Bunnings or Masters. I think Big W have them. If you're in the States, I'm sure you'd be able to find them anywhere. Craft shops, I'm sure, have them as well. And to apply the glue, I use these foam brushes. I use these because they're cheap as, and I just throw them out at the end because they tend to dry really hard and go really yuck. As you can see, this one with the glue, it like super expands it, and it's hard. So, I mean, I could always chop that off and use the rest of it, which is what I would usually do. Get a few uses out of it, save a bit of money. But I mean, they're not really that expensive anyway, so that's why I use them instead of brushes, and brushes are a bitch to clean as well, so I'd rather just use something that I can throw out. I also have a cutting board. I don't like using anything else but a cutting board because it has obviously lines on it. It comes in handy when you're trying to center things or even things up. Particularly if you've got gauntlets that have maybe a piece cut out of them or a specific design on them that needs straight lines, it really helps to sort of line it all up. Now, what I'll do is get stuck straight into it. Basically, I'll use a colour that you might be able to see a little bit clearer. So I'll use a blue. So I'm only going to make one gauntlet. You'll make two, obviously, one for each arm. For each gauntlet, you'll need 2 pieces of craft foam. Now, as I said, I can get away with using A4 pieces of paper, given the size of my arm. Now I'm just going to push this down so you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so essentially what I do is I'll get my template and make sure that it lines up. Now this one literally fits just from the very top of the page to the very bottoms in the corners. So I've been pretty lucky with this design that I can get away with doing that. A lot of the time you'll find that they actually, that they'll be too wide here. If you do have a relatively small arm or a relatively skinny arm, you'll be able to get away with, sort of manoeuvring it around the page to try and get it to fit. Obviously, that'll also depend on the height of the gauntlet you want, but you'll just have to sort of test it and see how it goes. So what I'll do, or what I usually do, is I will always cut out the details of the top layer first. So if you have a look, obviously you've got the detail here where you've got a top layer, which is literally just this bit here, and then the underneath layer, which gives it that sort of three-dimensional look to it. I have tried a number of times to cut pieces separately, put them together, glue them, and then try and even them out, and they just never look right. What I do now is I will line up the first piece, cut the middle bits out, glue them together, and then cut the bigger piece out. So that's what I'm going to do now. So just bear with me, I'm not the best at using the Stanley knife, so it'll be pretty rough. Obviously you'll want to take your time and make sure that you're getting all the right edges and the right corners, and then neat, and we'll go back through with a Dremel if you have a Dremel. We'll go back through and neaten some of the areas up. That's something else that you won't want to do, is exactly what I just did there. Is when I came around the corner, I actually pushed the piece of paper out and went down. So as you can see, it's lifting up here. What you want to do is when you come around a corner, you want to stop and you just want to reposition it. Make sure it's straight and flat, and then just come back around here. Now corners are always, I find, always really tricky. I just take them slowly, really. If I need to, I will actually just leave them and then go back over them with a pair of really small scissors, and then go in underneath and just make sure that it's all trimmed properly. But as I mentioned before, this is just going to be really quick. Probably not the neatest way of doing it, but I'm sure you don't want to be sitting here watching me do all of this for 10 minutes. So that's half of it done. Please just go through. It's freezing here today. It's ridiculous. It was something like 37 degrees yesterday, and it's raining and cold today. It's what happens when you live in Melbourne, people. Okay, and then the next piece. Now, if you haven't pushed right through to start with, don't stress. It's pretty easy stuff. If I take that off, obviously you can see where I've got, straighten that up again, see where I've got the pieces that I've cut out. So I'll literally, I push out. If I haven't cut straight through, obviously it won't come out. So I'll just go back over it and just whip it out. Now, save these pieces. These pieces will be used to make the fins of the gauntlets if you are choosing to put fins on there. It's always good to save it anyway. Obviously when you're using craft foam, it comes in all random different colours. I always save the offcuts because say if I'm making something that requires like extra small little pieces, it doesn't matter if they're different colours because you end up painting them anyway. So always save it all. Now I've overcut this section here, so you'll be able to see that there's a little piece coming off. I'll just whip that off. You want to, as I said, just probably take more time doing it, give it a bit more of an effort. This is purely just to show you how I do it. Obviously there'll be different ways that other people do it. It's probably good to watch a couple of different tutorials, find out what works best for you. If it's a combination of a couple of different techniques or if it's one or the other, make sure that you're doing something that you're comfortable doing. Otherwise you'll probably feel a little bit overwhelmed and maybe give up potentially. I don't want you to give up. I want you to obviously keep going and do it. Now what I'll do here is, so that's obviously cut out like that, not very well, but it's cut out. What I'll do is I'll literally glue on this side. If I glue on this side, then obviously I'll glue into the areas here. Don't want to do that. So I'm going to glue on the back side of this one. So this glue literally just comes out. Obviously you don't need to glue right up into the corners. That's just a waste of glue. You really only want to try and get as much as you need around. Generally speaking, glues go a fairly long way as well, so you don't necessarily need to totally cover. I'm just doing this pretty scarcely. If you do put too much glue on there, then there is a fair chance that it will seep out. It doesn't matter really, but it will obviously leave lumps. I'll show you in a second. I'll just do this before it dries. So yeah, instead of using the brush, I just use this. God, this stuff is strong. Whew. Just to spread it out. It also makes it a little bit tacky so that when I chuck this on, it'll dry almost straight away. Lay it on, rub it down. Oops, what did I do there? Okay, make sure that when you are actually doing it that you have a clean workspace, otherwise, oh God, otherwise you'll end up with a big divot like I just put in that, and that's not obviously what you want. Now I probably waited too long to put this glue, so I'm just going to quickly go over the bits that I didn't get and just re-glue it down. That's fine, all around there's fine. I obviously either didn't put enough down here or I waited too long and it dried before I could get to it, which is probably fairly likely. Okay. The other thing you'll probably want to do is wait for it to dry before you cut it. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to cut it. So I lay this over the top. Get my Stanley knife and just cut around the whole thing all at once. So you might have to go over it a couple of times just to get through all the layers. that's that one done. As I said before, I am doing this really quickly. You'll probably want to actually spend time doing this properly so it looks half decent and the edges are all nice and even, symmetrical, and the pieces are actually glued together properly, because I don't think that's glued together properly over there. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You get the idea. Okay. Also, I'm going to state the obvious. Be really careful when you're using a Stanley knife. Don't put your fingers in the way, because you'll slice your finger off, especially if it's a really, really sharp one. I'm sure you need your fingers for certain costumes. I'm sure characters have fingers. So try and be careful. Okay, so there we go. There is a very poorly made, very quickly made gauntlet. Now, if you go along and you go along all the edges, you can see that they're a bit rough. So what I'll do there is, if they're big, take a pair of scissors and I'll just trim. I'll trim off all the rough bits. Sometimes the Stanley knife doesn't go all the way through, which is fine. Obviously the insides, the edges of the insides are really rough. What you can do, which I should have really done this first, what you can do is before you actually glue the edges, you use the Dremel on the inside of those. It's just really important to, when you are doing that, to keep a really, really good grip on the craft foam. So if you have a look here, I'll just use this single piece here, turn the Dremel on, and you'll notice when I don't hold it really tightly or when I don't hold it close, it can destroy it. So it's really important to hold it really tight in the section that you're actually working on. So then what I'll do is I'll go through the entire section. I'll just lift this up slightly. Go through the entire edge with the Dremel and just even it out. Okay, something else that you can do just for a little bit of attention to detail, depending on what you're actually doing, is curve the edges. Now there's a couple of different ways of doing this. It's a lot easier if you're using thicker foam. This foam is pretty thin, but I use this foam because it's obviously quite flexible. But what you do is you can either use a Stanley knife, and when you're actually cutting it, cut it down on an angle and actually into the foam, so it gives it an edge, or, which is what I do because it's a far easier and quicker way of doing it, and what I do to all my masks is I actually run the Dremel along that top edge, so not the bottom one down here, although you can, but the top one. So I'll just quickly do that now. So as you can see the difference here, you've got a rounded edge and then you've got the straight edge up here. So I don't know how easy that is to see. But once you paint it, it looks pretty good, especially on a mask. It just gives it that consistency of the mask actually wrapping around. Now the next bit you want to do is obviously your fins. So I've got my 3 sizes of fins here. I use for all of my fins 3 layers of craft foam. So because I haven't finished these off. Oh, and you can also see where I put, oh, it's on this one, where I've put too much glue. You can actually see where it all is on the craft foam. Now it doesn't actually matter because once you prime it, it won't matter. It won't come up. But depending on what kind of glue you use, it can leave like a ridge, if you can see it in there. So yeah, just try, if you do have excess, just wipe it off. So yeah, I use 3 layers of foam. So what I can use is the cut-offs that were already 2 layers. I can just add another layer to it because that will save me a fair bit of wasted craft foam. So I'm just going to get the glue. Whoops. Try not to glue my computer. Just get the glue. Just run it across there. Oh, my cat's coming over to say hello. Oh yes, good boy. And then I'm going to use just this one here. I'm just gonna, actually that might be too small. So I'll use that one there. Again, I'm just doing this really quickly. I actually really like using PVA because it obviously spreads quite easily. It just takes a little while to dry, so if you don't mind waiting the drying time, then I do recommend using PVA. Plus this stuff, if you get it on something, you cannot get it off, including your fingers. It's a bit of a nightmare to get off. Okay, don't shove it on your bum hole. Keep going. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll lay, probably only get one piece out of this. So you've got to lay it as strategically as possible. Oh, there we go. You can get 2 pieces out of it. That's good. So as to get the best edges. So if that's lining it up with an edge that already exists, which I have done down here, then that's a good way of doing it. You'll get a fresh edge. So I'm just going to take the big one off for a second. Now this will take a couple of run-throughs just to get it through all 3 layers of foam, plus also there's fresh glue on there, which isn't ideal, but I've made that decision now, so I have to run with it. So as you can see, sometimes I need to pick it up, move it around, rearrange it, just so I can make sure that I'm getting the best cutting angle on it, just to avoid any mistakes. once you cut it, and then say if you've cut it slightly too big and you need to trim it down, it's really, really difficult to do because it is obviously such a soft material. So it's best just to try and get it as close as possible. Take your time doing it. Again, I'm probably not taking as much time as what I usually would. Probably got that out a bit too much. It's probably going to snap. That's the other thing that's actually really difficult, is the craft foam bends when you actually do get to the last, like you drag it with you, so it's probably not the best or the easiest thing to work with, but you'll get used to it. You'll figure out the best way to get around it and manage it. And I tend to, where I can, just hold bits down with my fingers and try and cut it. So that's the little one done. And then we've obviously got the big one to do. I assume I'm still filming. My computer screen has gone blank. And then the last edge here. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this, but it will probably drag a bit at the top and make it a little bit difficult to cut. But we got there. And I cut the paper. Okay, so then obviously that's the big one. And then you've got the medium-sized one to do as well. I'll just quickly do that. Again, I'll just use a cut-off that's already 2 layers, just add a layer to it. That layer seems to work pretty well. A few seconds to dry. I'm going to make sure that's on. Yep. Oh, I didn't stir that. That's gross. Okay. So then my medium-sized one. Yep. I'm just going to put right in the middle. I'm just going to cut it like that, just to make it easier for me right now. Okay, so that totally dragged just then, and that was... So because it dragged, you can see it's like squished up the corner. Craft foam's pretty forgiving, so just push it all back. And there you have your medium-sized one. So then you have your 3 fins, which will go here. Here. And here. Now what I do before I attach these is I grab my Dremel and I just go over and I just edge it. Again, I tend to leave them square edges rather than round them. Rounded ones would probably look really cool, especially if you could edge them so that they finished in a peak in the middle. So the middle layer was a peak. I think that would look pretty cool. I haven't tried that yet. I'm going to try it now, see how it goes. So an issue that I always have is when I use the Dremel on pieces that have points, they flare. So it sort of flicks up at the end because it gets a lot thinner. All I do there is I just sort of mould it back into place. Pop a bit of glue on it if I have to. And then if it's really bad, if it's, flicked up and, there's a little bit of extra, I guess, material on the end, I'll just grab my tiny scissors and just snip the end of it. I obviously didn't do that very well, but you get the idea. You'd keep going until it was actually a sharp edge, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to edge the rest of them and show you how to stick them on. Okay, so that's obviously not glued properly. I'm not going to bother, but you really want to glue that because that's going to cause issues. As you can see at the bottom, it's not working very well for me. Okay, the Dremel does make a fair bit of a mess. If you're doing large pieces or you're quite close to your project when you're working on it, I do suggest wearing a mask because you will inhale it because they are just fibre pieces that as you can see them all over my fingers. They do just dust off. They wash off, no problem. But yeah, I'm sure they're not the most safest of things to inhale. So literally when you are when you're putting them all together, just make sure that they're all the right way, they're all the right in the right size order, lay them out, figure out what distance you want them first. I usually just put them on by eye. You can measure them, taking into obviously consideration the different sizes of each of them and where they want to go, where you want them to go. I'll literally just get the glue, put it on the end if it wants to come out. Try it up a bit, I think. Oh, goodness. Okay, so just put it all on the end there. And then pop it where you want. Hold it down for a minute. If you're using PVA, you'll want to hold it down for a little bit longer. Probably put it on, wait for it to be a bit tacky, and then stick it on there. If you do, they do balance pretty well, particularly because they're 3 layers. So you shouldn't have too much of a problem with them. Just try not to knock them as you're going, because then they'll dry on an angle. I'm going to put one about there. So that's not very straight. I mean, I can see it on the computer, but that's the one that's not glued properly, so. And then this one here. And stick it on. That'll do. Oops. Okay. So set them over to dry. They don't look very straight to me. But anyway, okay, set them over to dry. Then grab your other pieces that you cut out, and you want to cut out your bands to secure them with. Where have I put them up here? So these can be any size you want, any shape you want. What I will do with them is secure them to one side. Here, or actually I'll use the pink ones because they're already secured. So they're just PVA'd on, and I mean they're pretty strong. They're not going to go anywhere. So PVA on one side, and then what I'll do on the other side is Velcro of some sort, Velcro dot. I will actually super glue them on so that they can just Velcro on and off. And they would actually be straight because that's not straight at the moment, but you get the idea. And so they'd Velcro on and off my arm. I don't have any Velcro at the moment, so I can't actually show you how I would do it, but it's pretty straightforward. Just super glue it on. That glue would probably hold a lot better than PVA on the back of Velcro tabs. So then I just cut as many strips as I need. I'm only going to do 2. Obviously the bigger the gauntlet, the more you'll need. The more secure you want it, the more you'll want. So it's up to you how many you actually want to do. You can cut, obviously layer them up and cut them as well. That's probably something I should have done, but anyway. That wasn't very straight, but never mind. Okay, so then I've got my 2 pieces here. So then what I'll do is, depending on which side it is, say if this is my left side, so I'll go on my left arm, which this is obviously huge for my arm, but I'll go on my left arm. So then I want it so that the tabs are probably close, the Velcro tabs are probably closest to me, so that they're far easier to put on. So I'd want the Velcro on this side, which means I'd secure my pieces onto this side. So all I'll do is pop some glue on there. I have a feeling this will come out the sides, but anyway. And then pop it on where you feel is the best spot for you. Might mean that you have to play around with it and put it on and maybe have someone help you. It's hard to do it with only one hand. And figure out what's going to be the easiest for you to put on when you're actually wearing it. Oops, glued myself to that. Obviously some people don't have you know, someone to help them when they're getting ready for their cosplay in the morning, or you know, when they're actually making it. So it might be a little bit, oh, glued myself to it again. That'll be fun to get off. So there you have it. There is a gauntlet. Well, how I made my Nightwing ones anyway. By no means are they the best. They are probably the cheapest and the quickest. The more you do them, the more you'll get better at doing them. That didn't take me very long at all. You obviously just saw that. You can do different shapes and different designs. I actually designed one for someone who contacted me the other day, wanting a full arm gauntlet for a Nightwing cosplay that he's doing. What I did there was basically, so you've got your lower arm, which is a very similar, I guess, pattern to that, but it's got the two peaks here and wraps around. You've got the three bits on that side. Now I started using green craft foam, and then I thought just for effect I'd actually cover it in blue and black just so he could see how it worked. The top part of it is another part that actually goes on the back of the arm, and then there's a hinge or two hinges between them, so that the arm can actually move while wearing the armour, and there is a elbow piece that goes in there somewhere, but I'm not sure where I put it. So basically how that works, I didn't have any proper hinges, so I've just used craft brads. They're not strong at all, but essentially, move that out of the way. So that obviously wraps around there. So I did this to obviously the size of my arm. There, and it's busted. I broke that. So there's those three there, and then obviously the brad came off that side because it was a really cheap craft brad. I'd actually probably want to make that a little bit longer if I was to do that for myself, but I was literally just doing a template for him so that he could make it. It attaches on that side, and there would be some sort of Velcro piece that attached that around there. You'd also heat that up a bit so that it would mould to your arm, so that it would actually be the shape of your arm, and that it actually moves and allows you full movement in your arm. You're not stuck like this all day because you have really awesome armour that you've made that you don't want to ruin. Again, as you can see, that one bends slightly, which is also the benefit of using thinner craft foam for this kind of stuff. You can make it look thicker, but then you might have issues with it actually moving. I'm sure if that was on properly, it probably wouldn't move at all. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool concept. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. I just don't have any elastic or anything. But yeah, it's pretty cool arm hinge. Obviously works the same for a leg. If you're doing like thigh and shin armour and you needed the knee joint to be able to work, exactly the same concept. That would be your knee hole. That would be your shin, and then that would obviously be for your thigh. Although that would be a very small leg, but that works pretty well. So really, I mean, once you have the, I guess the template for your arm in an armour piece, something like that, just the outline shape, really you'll be able to do a lot of things with it. You'll be able to, that was literally from that piece as well. That was from that piece as well. So that top piece there, that bottom piece there, sorry. So yeah, I hope that was okay. If you've got any questions, let me know. If you have any suggestions or improvements for me, please also let me know. I am also learning how to do things. I'm watching a lot of tutorials online from some of you who have taught me things that I wouldn't have otherwise figured out. So thank you for that. I hope this helps someone at least. If it helps just one person, makes me happy. So let me know. And also, I'd love to see your designs from it as well, where you take it, how far you take it. Use your imagination, let it go wild. And until next time.